In many of my top wine videos, I try to include wines from a number of different countries so that there's something for everyone. However, I know that many of my viewers are very big Italian wine fans. So in this video, I've compiled some of my favorite Italian wine recommendations from the past 12 to 18 months or so, and I've put them into this single video. There's red wines, white wines, and even a sparkling wine, and numerous different regions and price points represented. So there should be something for everyone. The next top wine for $50 a bottle is one that I saw selling at least 3 places for around $48 or so, but I also saw many places selling it for quite a bit more than that. So definitely be patient and shop around when looking for this wine, which is absolutely a compelling value if you can find it for less than $50 a bottle. This is a highly acclaimed wine that's classified as a Toscana IGT, but it's actually 100% Sangiovese. The Toscana IGT classification is attributable to the fact that the vineyards that produce the fruit for this wine straddle 2 different appellations, Chianti Classico and Colli Senese. But this duality is actually reflected in the wine, which is one reason that I'm a big fan of the 2020 Felsina Fontalloro Toscana IGT. Despite the fact that 2020 was a warmer vintage in Tuscany, this wine has some elegance. It's a mineral-driven wine with flavors and aromas that include cherry, plum, mixed spice, orange peel, and mushroom. This wine has refined tannins, ample acidity, and a long finish. It's a wine that you can enjoy young with a healthy decant, but there's no rush, as it'll also show well for at least another 6 to 8 years, or a bit longer than that. They make about 3,800 cases, 1,200 of which they import into the United States, so you should be able to track this one down. Located in Piedmont, Italy, GD Vajra is a family-owned producer that traces its roots way back to the 1880s. This next top wine for $40 a bottle offers compelling value at this price point. I'm not normally a fan of the 2020 vintage for Barolo, as I found that many of those wines tend to be a little bit overly ripe for my personal taste. Instead, I typically prefer vintages like 2015, 16, and 2019. However, the 2020 GD Vajra Barolo Albe is a wine that absolutely crushed it in the 2020 vintage. This highly acclaimed wine is definitely a wine that will benefit from another 2 to 3 years of additional bottle age, but after that it will make an ideal cellar defender and help you to keep your hands off some of those other vintages that are particularly strong and which will require additional bottle aging. This is a mineral-driven wine with descriptors that include raspberry, cherry, mixed spice, and rose petals. There's ample acidity and a long, lingering finish. Definitely a no-brainer if you're a fan of Nebbiolo. Next up is the Ferrari Brut sparkling wine, which comes from Trentino-Alto Adige. This is a wine that's made in the same production method as champagne, so the secondary fermentation takes place in the bottle that you purchase. This is a wine that's a consistent performer each and every year, and it's typically well received by critics. This wine comes from a fairly large producer and it has broad distribution, so you should be able to locate this wine with no problem at all. And I've also found it on restaurant wine lists at many Italian restaurants around the world. This wine is 100% Chardonnay, so it's a Blanc de Blanc, and it comes in at around 12.5% alcohol by volume. You can expect flavors and aromas that include lemon, pear, apple, spice, and floral notes, and it has a rich and creamy texture with ample acidity. A very nice sparkling wine. Camigliano is a quality-minded producer of Brunello and Montalcino that was founded back in 1957 by the current owner's father. In the 1980s, they began an ambitious replanting program in the vineyard, and as a result, they have 100 hectares planted to vine out of an overall estate that's around 500 hectares. Subsequently, they built an underground cellar, and they also began to use organic farming methods. As a result, quality has never been higher at Camigliano. So the next top wine for $40 a bottle is the Camigliano Brunello and Montalcino from the outstanding 2019 vintage. They produced around 16,000 cases of this wine, so you should be able to track one down with no difficulty. This is an enjoyable Brunello de Montalcino with descriptors that include blackberry, fig, plum, cherry, and spice. It's one that's showing well, relatively young, but is certainly capable of aging for up to 10 years as well. 2019 is a phenomenal vintage for Brunello di Montalcino, and this is yet another reminder to keep adding them to your collection. Of course, wines at the $30 price point are wines that can be cellar defenders for many of my viewers. This next wine is one of my favorite cellar defenders, and it's a wine that helps me from digging into some of my favorite Nebbiolo-based wines from Barolo and Barbaresco way before I should. I'm talking about the Vietti Langhe Nebbiolo Perbaco. Of course, Vietti is one of the top producers in Barolo. They make some high-quality single vineyard Barolo as well as a classic Barolo, both of which cost much more than this wine. The Langhe Nebbiolo Perbaco from Vietti is an impressive wine that sells for as little as $25 to $30 per bottle. I enjoyed this one most recently at the Hollywood Bowl when I had it during a concert. This is a wine that comes in at around 14% alcohol by volume. It opened up fairly quickly on a pop and pour. Descriptors included wild cherry, raspberry, dried roses, and mixed spice. You can enjoy this one immediately, but it's also capable of aging for at least 5 to 8 years as well. Arneis means little rascal. This grape is aptly named because it's exceedingly difficult to grow. So difficult, in fact, that it almost became extinct in the 1960s. But legendary producer Bruno Giacosa, along with one other winery, helped to save it from extinction back then by bottling it commercially. While many of Bruno Giacosa's wines are quite pricey, the next top wine for $40 a bottle, namely the 2022 Bruno Giacosa Roero Arneis, sells for a very reasonable $40 per bottle. This is a wine that I discovered during my first trip to Piedmont when I was looking for a white wine to pair with some of the early courses. This is a wine that's commonly found on many Italian restaurant wine lists throughout the world, so I definitely encourage you to give it a try the next time you see it. This is a wine that pairs extremely well with starter courses, salads, seafoods, and pastas. If you're not familiar with Arneis, you can expect descriptors such as lemon, peach, apricot, pineapple, floral aromatics, and wet stone. It tends to be medium plus in body. It is naturally low in acidity, but especially the Bruno Giacosa bottling is extremely well balanced. So definitely a very interesting wine and one that I highly recommend for around $40 per bottle. Next up is a wine that's produced from a winery that was founded way back in 1902. This producer has 105 hectares of vineyards in Valpolicella Classico. This is significant because Valpolicella Classico, in my opinion, is quite a bit better than Valpolicella. The difference is that Valpolicella Classico must be produced from fruit that is grown in the historic Valpolicella Classico zone. This is the hilly area that's located in the foothills, and there tends to be vineyards with limestone or clay or volcanic soils. These soils, coupled with a somewhat higher elevation from the foothills, create cooler environments for the vineyards and result in a longer growing season. As a result, Valpolicella Classico tends to have much higher acidity and much greater concentration and richness than Valpolicella. So the next top Italian wine for $25 a bottle is the 2020 Tommasi Rafael Valpolicella Classico Superiore. This highly acclaimed wine is a blend that consists of Corvina, Rondinella, and Molinara. If you're not familiar with Valpolicella Classico, it can have a body that's somewhat analogous to a Pinot Noir or a Rioja. So if you enjoy those wines, you may want to give this one a try. The Superiore at the end of the name typically refers to a wine that will have slightly higher alcohol by volume and which will be aged in oak for a year. And indeed, this wine spent about 15 months in large Slavonian oak casks. This wine has juicy cherry and strawberry flavors, and there's also mixed herbs and spice. There's fine tannins and ample acidity. This is one that's showing well right out of the gate and you can enjoy immediately, but it will last a few years as well. This Valpolicella Classico Superiore is also an excellent food companion, and you can enjoy it with pasta with rich sauces, roasts, white meats, or cheeses. I'm a huge fan of Super Tuscan wines, particularly the very strong 2021 vintage, which is on store shelves now. Unfortunately, however, prices have been rising quite dramatically, and this even applies to some second wines from top producers that are getting to be a bit out of hand, in my opinion. Fortunately, however, we always have alternatives, and this next wine is an outstanding Super Tuscan wine that sells for only around $30 per bottle. Better still, those of you looking for recommendations for wines that you can enjoy immediately will enjoy this wine as it was intended to be enjoyed young, but it's certainly capable of aging for a while as well. The impressive 2021 Castello di Bolgheri Vajra was named after the great-grandmother of the current owner. This is a blend that consists of 55% Cabernet Sauvignon, 28% Merlot, 12% Cabernet Franc, and 5% Petit Verdot. This is a rich, full-bodied wine with lush black fruit, licorice, leather, menthol, and mixed spice. It's a seamless wine with refined tannins. You really can't go wrong with this one, particularly given the very attractive $30 price point. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. Carlo Ferrini is one of the top winemakers not just in Italy, but in the entire world. Carlo learned how to make wine, at least in part, during a stint at legendary winery Soldera, but he's also made wine for some of the very top names in Italy for many years, including Casanova di Neri. In 2002, Carlo established his own winery with his daughter, namely Podere Giodo. Podere Giodo's goal is to produce wines that are well balanced and elegant with very long finishes. As with Soldera, there's an emphasis on uncompromising quality. As a winemaker, Carlo Ferrini had traveled to Sicily for many years to make wines for others. But in 2016 or so, he began to make wine from Sicilian fruit for Podere Giodo, and they are excellent. So the next top wine for $50 a bottle is the 2021 Albarelli di Giodo from Podere Giodo. This is Nerello Mascalese from Sicily. You can expect flavors and aromas that include bright, vibrant red fruit, such as cherries and raspberries, and there's also going to be some floral notes, as well as dried herbs and spices. And you can also expect an earthy lava-type quality to this wine. This is a wine that has medium body, ample acidity, and powdery tannins. It's a wine that you can enjoy now, but it would definitely be better if you can hold off for another 2 to 3 years or so. I'll also note that I found the prices for this wine to be all over the board. There were a couple places that sold it for around $50 or a little bit less, but also some places that sold it for far more than that. So definitely make sure to shop around, as it's definitely a wine that's well worth having in your collection. Founded in 1984, Castello Romatorio is a quality-minded producer of Brunello di Montalcino, but which also makes outstanding wines from international varietals. One example is the namesake wine, the 2021 Castello Romatorio IGT. This wine is the next top Italian wine for $25 a bottle. This is a full-bodied red Tuscan blend that's made from Syrah and Petit Verdot. It's concentrated and savory. They ferment this wine in stainless steel and mature it in concrete before it's bottled and released. Flavors and aromas include blackberry, black cherry, black currant, violets, chocolate, and spice. It's already showing incredibly well, and you don't need to decant this one much or give it any additional bottle age, but you can certainly enjoy it over the next 3 to 4 years or so. This is a really impressive, enjoyable Super Tuscan wine for this price point. The next top wine for $25 also comes from the Veneto, but this time we're talking about a white wine, namely the Inama Vigneti di Foscarino Soave Classico. This outstanding Soave Classico is produced from the Garganega grape. This excellent Soave Classico is bone dry with refreshing acidity. It has a medium body, and flavors and aromas include apple, citrus, white peach, blossom, honeysuckle, and wet stone. The finish is very long, and this is really an enjoyable wine, particularly with seafood. I first discovered this wine when I was traveling in Venice, and I ordered it to pair with some seafood. That's an extraordinary combination, and I found that I've really enjoyed it. So now I look for Suave Classico whenever I'm at an Italian restaurant and I'm getting seafood, and there's typically some excellent and affordable options on most restaurant wine lists. When it comes to wines from Piedmont, Italy, many wine collectors that I know tend to focus exclusively on the Nebbiolo-based wines such as Barolo and Barbaresco. But I think this is a mistake, as there's also lots of very high quality, underrated Barbera being produced. Of course, as with everything else, it's important not to generalize. In Piedmont, there's 3 times more Barbera being produced than Nebbiolo. Barbera is also capable of producing very high yields, and so there are a number of uninspiring, inexpensive examples of Barbera being produced as well. Those are not the wines that I'm talking about in this video. However, there's also some outstanding examples of Barbera that are produced by high-quality producers that restrict yields and treat it with the respect that it deserves. One of the things I like best about Barbera is that it's the perfect choice when you're at an Italian restaurant. This is so because the prices tend to be quite reasonable, even with a restaurant markup. In addition, it's naturally high in acidity and low in tannin, which means that it doesn't take a long time to open up, and you can enjoy it even in its youth. But due to the high acidity, it's also capable of aging as well, particularly if the producer restricted yields and it has some impressive depth and concentration. Just this past week, I was reminded about how age-worthy and impressive Barbera can be. I tried 2 different Barberas, one from 1997 and one from 1998. Both were from a high-quality producer named Bava, and both were extremely impressive. In fact, I blinded one of them as a Nebbiolo-based wine from about 20 to 25 years ago. In addition to Bava, some of my other favorite producers of high-quality Barbera include Giacomo Conterno, Roberto Vorzio, and also Michele Chiarlo. The best part about these wines is that most of them are available for $30 to $50 per bottle in the United States, although the Conterno wines are probably going to be more expensive than that. But definitely on a going forward basis, at least for my own collection, I plan to buy a lot more Barbera, especially on release, and then enjoy some of it while it's young, but also put some bottles away so I can enjoy some after it has time to develop some additional complexity in the cellar. One of the things I like best about the James Suckling Great Wines of the World event this time was the large number of Brunello di Montalcino producers, many of which were pouring the outstanding 2019 vintage, as well as the 16 Reservas. So the next wine I'm going to feature is the Fellini Brunello di Montalcino from 2019. This is a wine that received a 98-point score from James Suckling and sells for around $85 per bottle. Fellini is a historic estate that's located in eastern Montalcino. They have 14 hectares of vines planted on their 100-hectare estate. Their vineyards are northeast facing, so even in warmer vintages, they're able to produce wines that have some exceptional elegance and finesse. The vines are planted at altitudes ranging from 380 meters to 400 meters above sea level. Descriptors for this wine included black cherry, mint, licorice, roses, white pepper, and orange peel. It has 15% alcohol by volume, but you'd never know it because it's extremely well balanced and it carries it extremely well. This wine is already very impressive, but it will certainly be better in 2 to 3 years, so I would suggest putting it away for a couple years if you can. Specifically, the 2021 Cantina Terlano Vorburg Pinot Bianco Reserva, which is from Alto Adige. This is as stunning and complex a Pinot Bianco as you'll find in all of Alto Adige. This wine is 100% Pinot Bianco, and the vineyard sources are located at 450 to 650 meters above sea level. Despite the fact that this is a Pinot Bianco, it's a serious and age-worthy wine. It's mineral-driven and complex, but also quite elegant. In addition to the minerality, this wine has dazzling descriptors that include white peach, apple, pear, quince, chamomile, and pineapple. This wine is silky and elegant, with ample acidity and a creamy texture. This is a very highly acclaimed wine, and one that's capable of aging in your cellar up to 10 years or so. When you're talking about red wines from Umbria, the most important grape to know is Sagrantino. Sagrantino is grown on hillsides which range in elevation from around 220 to 470 meters above sea level. This helps with sunlight interception, as the Sagrantino grapes require full sunlight to ripen. Sagrantino is an extremely tannic grape. I compare it somewhat to Aglianico from Campania, but it has a dark fruit profile with blackberry and plum. It has high acidity and high tannins. Tannin management is extremely important when they're making these wines, and oftentimes it gets extended aging before it's released. The most important red wine in Umbria is Montefalco Sagrantino DOCG. The DOCG regulations require that this wine be 100% Sagrantino, and it has to mature for 33 months before release, 1 year of which must be in oak. But producers do take a different approach to that oak. Some producers will use new French oak barriques, whereas others will use large oak foudre, and then use bottle aging for an extended period of time as well. There's certainly a number of excellent producers of Montefalco Sagrantino, but one of the most famous and one of the most reliable is Arnaldo Capre. Arnaldo Capre has a number of different expressions of Montefalco Sagrantino, and any of them are worth trying, but one of the most widely available is the Cleppiano. This wine sells for around $55 or so in the United States. It's a wine that will definitely cruise in your cellar for at least 10 to 15 years or so. When you're talking about food pairings for Montefalco Sagrantino, one of my absolute favorites is a ribeye, as the fat from this rich cut of beef goes perfectly and helps to offset the tannic structure of the Sagrantino. In addition to the Arnaldo Capre wines, I was at an Umbria tasting earlier this week at Italy, and another one of the favorites that I enjoyed there is called Boccali. This is a smaller producer, but they did a really excellent job with their Montefalco Sagrantino, so you can't go wrong with this one as well. And this one is a little bit less expensive too. It sells for around $35 a bottle or so. If you're interested in trying a more approachable and less expensive Umbrian red wine, you'll definitely want to try Montefalco Rosso DOC. Montefalco Rosso DOC is a blend, and it typically consists of 60 to 70% Sangiovese, and there's also a decent percentage of Sagrantino as well. But this wine is definitely far more approachable, and it's made in an early drinking style. Most of these wines are also much more affordable and tend to sell for more like $20 to $25 per bottle, even in the United States, and undoubtedly for less than that in Europe. The best white wines in Umbria tend to be those from the Orvieto DOC. Orvieto DOC wines have to be at least 60% Trebbiano and or Grechetto, and the fruit has to be grown between 100 and 550 meters above sea level. The higher percentage of Grechetto, the better the wine typically is, as Grechetto tends to have more flavor intensity and concentration. To find the best quality expressions of Orvieto, you definitely want to look for Orvieto Classico, which comes from the historic production zone, and also look for the word Superiore, which has lower maximum yield requirements and which results in wines with greater flavor and concentration. When it comes to high-quality Orvieto, definitely keep an eye out for the producer named Barberani. Barberani has a wine that I particularly enjoy that sells for only around $19, even in the United States, namely the Barberani Orvieto Classico Superiore Castagnolo. This wine is 70% Grechetto and 30% Trebbiano. This is a mineral-driven wine, and it has a salty saline quality that I appreciate, and there's also flavors and aromas of citrus, lemon, and wildflower. It comes in at right around 12% alcohol by volume. If you'd like to learn more about Italian wines, I've published numerous videos on various Italian wine subjects, including Super Tuscan wines, Barolo, Brunello, Chianti Classico, and many more. So if you'd like to check those out, be sure to check out the playlist that's linked above.